Hello and welcome to Transformations Cafe, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Cafe is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. We're a nonprofit all volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to visit our website at theglobaltransformation.org, where you can find many more of our resources, information about us. And if you'd like to join our community of change makers, there's a join button at the top of each page. And if you'd like to support our work, including programs like Transformations Cafe, there is a donate button at the top of each page that interacts with PayPal. So, as I just kind of tipped my hand, today's program, we're really very grateful, delighted, and honored to welcome back Philip Wade as our guest. Philip was our guest the first time a year ago, last July. And if you didn't see that program with Philip, it is on our YouTube channel. Would encourage you to check out that experience from last year. Since that time, I've had the great privilege of staying in touch with Philip, and we've communicated on various topics. And one of those was discussing his return, which is now finally here today. So it's wonderful that this has come about again. And we wanted to share Philip's work and unique ways of helping us realize our true nature. And it really feels like it's more important than ever these days, with so many things happening in the world. And I'm going to read a brief bio. And then today we're going to focus on a particular topic that Philip has brought a lot of gifted resource to, I would say, a lot of helpful ways that we can look at how we can integrate what we might call our higher selves or soul or whatever language you choose to identify that aspect of ourselves, and how we can integrate that with our quote unquote everyday lives and eventually come to live as the infinite silence, a term that we'll talk about more, I'm sure, um, permanently, especially how we can maintain that when our minds and our emotions and our physical bodies get distracted with what are commonly referred to as triggers. And Philip has shared a wonderful phrase to describe how this can be done. He calls it triggers to treasures. And so we're going to explore this today with a combination of conversation as well as some guided experiences that Philip will lead us through. So I'm going to go ahead and give a brief introduction bio. So with anyone who may not be familiar with you, Philip has a little bit of background, and then we'll get into our conversation. So after a 14-year meditation journey, Philip experientially realized the nature of the true self, which referred to itself as infinite silence. In his former life, Philip was a chartered civil engineer and operating group director of a large business. In 2000, in response to dreaming about work on a skiing holiday, Philip began meditation. Ultimately, this led him to leave the old world behind in 2009 at the height of his career to focus on a deep inner calling. Since 2014, he has shared the gift of self-realization with the world in ways led by meditative insight through direct experience of the infinite silence meditation, spiritual inquiry, infinite touch, and via his website and other outlets. His style is simple, compassionate, and offers exquisite clarity. His sharing is all based on direct experience, is not rooted in any tradition, and is ideal for the present era. His message focuses on helping people recognize, inquire into, and experience the absolute simplicity and power of the infinite silence that is our true essence. Since Philip was our guest last year, he has developed the Living Soul app, which I've been given the gift of sampling a bit over the last several weeks. And it really is just a wonderful way to access all of his work as well as several new resources and features. And it's a great resource and something that I'm grateful that you've shared. So, with that, hello, Philip. It's good to see you again.
Hi,
Thanks for
Ken. Thank
joining
you for
us.
the opportunity to be here and with the AFGT community and a few familiar faces as well. So it's a delight. So thank you very much for the invitation.
It's really a pleasure, and it's been a delight, for our continuing correspondence and conversations. Really have enjoyed growing the relationship and friendship. As I mentioned, kind of generally in the introduction, this is a time when all sorts of triggering events seem to be happening, and they are happening on scales anywhere from very deeply personal and specific to in our individual lives, and then increasingly, I think, also collectively. And so I just think this is very timely. But uh, let's see if we can maybe define or give a context for what we mean by triggers first, if you would.
Sure. So, you know, people experience all sorts of ups and downs emotionally in their lives. And, a trigger is really any event, whether it be a person, place, or event, that brings up an emotion, and typically those emotions are historical things. So, you might be watching something on TV, or somebody says something, or some events happening in the world, or you experience some particular event, and suddenly, from being quite happy and things are relatively normal, there's a whole host of emotion here, whether it be, whatever that might be, whether it be anger, sadness, guilt, shame, you name it, a whole range of emotions. So, any of those events that cause that, often unexpectedly for people, then that's a trigger. And what most people don't realize, and we'll get into this in more depth, is that uh, whilst people can find that from extremely challenging through to a relatively mild thing, what's not commonly realized that trigger event is an invitation to a deeper peace, and we'll perhaps get into that. But that's the trigger. Anything that causes such a reaction in the body, in your life experience, and it could be from any number of sources.
Thanks. And I think the ones that I've uh, kind of tuned into more and as I've learned about this and learned from your work and others about how to use these and I love the way you speak of them as invitations or treasures because right away it sets them in a different light rather than something to merely try to avoid or ignore or keep stuff down inside us. But they're, in my experience at least, most obvious um, when other people are involved, and family tend to be folks that can make the most salient triggers, shall we say, try to keep it positive, uh, the most opportunities available. Um,
Yes.
or perhaps give us the most generous invitations. How about that? That come from family, but it could be your boss or friends, but not always. And as we were talking about earlier, now with so many things changing in the world, they can be just things that are changes in kind of our what we thought to be true, and that something can be triggered when we had lived our lives with a perception of reality that is suddenly lost because it's shown not to be the case. And those can also be triggering events. So I think again, it's timely to do this. So one of the things that I've been receiving as I've been trying the Living Soul app, there are um, just periodic little statements or reminders that are pushed to my phone. And the other day, one of them really caught my eye, and you had written, and if I mess this up, please correct me, but you had you had the words listen and silent, and you said same letters, but kind of very different words. And I think that what we'll get into here is that the silence is one of the main ways that we do this transformation. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yeah. And silence isn't something that people necessarily give a lot of thought to, but what was revealed, as you referred to in the brief bio there at the beginning there, that our true nature, the term I use for it is infinite silence. People might use many terms. They might use essence, source, whatever, infinite I, infinite consciousness. But that infinite silence is is our true nature. It's not something you need to believe me on. But because silence is unchanging in its nature, and what I will call the phenomenal world, and that includes all of these triggers that are there, are constantly changing. It's that infinite silence that I'm referring to and speaking to, aka awareness, infinite consciousness, are fundamentally the same thing. It's that unchanging nature of that is the true power that's within you, and it's that, and ultimately that alone, that will bring about the transformation.
We had a guest, Lissa Friedman, on again recently. She talks about the boundless, and it's the same type of thing. And I think you would hear that from many people that it's really kind of releasing all of those things we identify with and getting down to our true essence.
Sure.
Would now be a time? Do you want to do the first exercise
Okay, yeah, if
to
you
end
like. I
this?
mean, perhaps the best thing is to probably, I always like to get, rather than talking about this theoretically, is to help people begin to start to recognize, open to a recognition of this silence, because it may not appear to you right now to be immediately obvious, and I've been sharing this message a long time now, but there's a silence within us, and I also use the term awareness, that's always present, and it's that is the pathway, and indeed is the source of inner peace, and indeed the resolution of all of these emotional triggers. And I'll talk about where they come from in a minute, but let's just do a little exercise. It's very simple, this, and it's going to involve quite a loud ding. Excuse me, just here's the original. Yes, the original sound is on. On this singing bowl I've got here. And what I'd like to invite you to do is just close your eyes for a moment and just pay attention to what happens here. This is a really simple, there's no tricks here, there's just a very simple exercise. So you're going to hear a fairly loud ding on the singing bowl, and with your eyes closed, just place your attention on that and notice what's happened, and I'll guide you through that as we do this. So here we go. So keeping your eyes closed, just paying attention to what actually transpired there. Before I struck the bowl, there was a silent pause. And then as I struck it, there was a sharp rise in the intensity of sound, reached a peak. And without any effort on anybody's part, that peak of intensity gradually faded to silence. And then there was a pause, and the same thing happened. Now, the question to ask inside, and this is not a mental question, just let this kind of float into awareness. Who or what was aware of that happening? Who or what was aware of that happening? Now, the mind's tendency will be to go to me, but just set that aside for a moment and notice that there may have been, at this same time, physical sensations in your body. There may have even been an emotion, thoughts, feelings. All of these were simply in one's awareness, including the sound of the singing bowl. So one can't be all of those phenomena. There has to be, I trust you can see, a presence, an awareness that just simply and silently notices the emergence of this phenomena like a wave, and then gradually it fades to silence. And it turns out all these phenomena are changing over time. But there's a presence that just is aware. So if we begin to recognize that there's a witnessing presence to any phenomena in the body-mind experience, and even to external phenomena, the next question, and again this is not a mental exercise for you, was that or is that which is aware of the changing phenomena affected by the phenomena, or does it just notice? Does it just observe neutrally, silently? Does it feel like there's just a sense of awareness that simply, silently, effortlessly is aware? Whatever's happening here now. I'll strike the singing bowl one more time. So let's just pause there and just check in with everybody. You can gently open your eyes now. Did you get a sense that there's an awareness, a stillness that just watches?
See some head shaking.
Yeah, so there's a few
Yes,
people nodding.
affirming.
Good. Yeah, good. And if you didn't, don't worry. It'll come. This is fundamentally important. This recognition that what I did there is called an awareness recognition exercise. It's profoundly simple. Now it turns out the essence of meditation, self-realization, enlightenment, whatever word you want to give this, is awareness. Is awareness. And this awareness, which is ever present, is always unchanging, unmoving, and unblemished by whatever's appearing in life. It's nothing more complicated than that. That is the essence of meditation, self-realization, enlightenment. And the mind might go, it can't be that simple. But I can tell you for free, it is that simple. It is that simple. There's nothing complicated about ultimate truth. I have a phrase that I sometimes use. Truth is simple. Ego is complicated. It is profoundly simple. Now, it turns out, even though it might not be your experience right now, that this awareness is always here. Always here. And it's always unaffected by whatever's happening in life. Always. It's not something you need to believe me on, because when this is experientially realized, it will be seen to be so. Every realized being, and there's fortunately been quite a few over the millennia, and an increasing number these days, will tell you the same thing. Will point to this same awareness, silence, stillness, essence, source, whatever name you want to give it. And it's within us all, because our true nature is that. How are we doing, folks? I can talk for hours about this stuff, so are we all doing okay so far? Any questions at any point, just let me know. So this one simple recognition is enough, and this might sound outrageous to the mind, is enough to transform your life. It really is. Because it is so powerful, so profound, and it's infinite, as in the term infinite silence, i.e. unlimited. It also happens to be not bound by time, space, physical form, or contrast. It's just an eternal silence awareness that's within us. So how are we doing? Are we all making some kind of sense? Now, the recognition of that, the experiential realization of that, is what the source of self-realization, enlightenment, inner peace is. There is nothing more complicated, honestly. There isn't than that. People have asked me thousands of questions, but they all boil down to this recognition. Now, our title tonight is From Triggers to Treasures. And it's a great title because everybody experiences at some point, whether it be from fairly mild through to extreme circumstances, some kind of emotional range. And after the most challenging ones are when, as Ken was saying earlier, a family member says something, or a close friend, or at work, or some situation arises, and suddenly you're triggered and you're completely lost in an emotional storm. That's quite a common human experience. I trust we can all agree with that. And, we've all experienced that at one time or another. And in those moments, it can feel really, really challenging. And yet, what very few people actually realize is that those moments when that arises, that those trigger events, are actually what I refer to as an invitation. An invitation. And the reason it's an invitation is because when that arises in the body, essentially that same awareness that I was pointing at and we've just done a little exercise on is the one that sees it, notices it. However, what the majority of people do is they become lost in the emotion. So I am, the words I am, sad, angry, upset, guilty, shame, whatever emotion you're, and then the instant you put any of those words after the words I am, you instantly are identifying with the experience, i.e. the emotion in this case, and you become it, completely missing the fact that there's this unchanging presence that's observing it. The transition from becoming and identifying with the emotion versus recognizing and associating oneself with the witnessing presence. That's what self-realization, that's what enlightenment, that's what inner peace is all about. That's what it boils down to. So the instant that trigger experience arises, typically what will happen is people, as I said, they become it, I am this, and so they get lost in it for a while. That doesn't really resolve the root causes of the problem. However, at some point, a recognition comes that, oh, a few minutes ago, everything was okay with the world. Suddenly there's this emotion here. And that's the point at which you can take a step back, so to like, if you like, just look at this, let this energy of emotion flow without any judgment. Just let it pass through the body. Associating with the witnessing presence. And I'm going to turn the original sound back on for a moment. Imagine now the sound from the singing bowl is an emotion. So the same thing happened there. Now, if that was an emotion and first there was no emotion, it rose to a peak of intensity and faded to silence. An emotion, energetically, spiritually speaking, is essentially a vibration. We may add all sorts of different labels to it, sad, happy, you name it. But it's just a vibration. And it turns out that all vibrations, without any further input, will fade to silence naturally. What typically happens, get ready for this, folks, this is going to be quite noisy for a moment. Original sound coming back on. When we identify with the emotion, get ready for the noise, this is what happens. In other words, it gets very noisy for a period. And what's actually happening there is you're continuing to input, put energy into, buy into, and essentially become the emotion. And thus the process carries on for longer because you're essentially feeding the emotion with identity, energy. You take that identification away and become and just accept the witnessing that you are the witnessing presence, untouched, unmoved. Only one thing will happen. It will fade to silence. The body may release this in phases. It may not happen all in one go. There may be peaks of intensity, there may be transitions, there may be insights, there may be clarity about where the source of that came from. But essentially, when one is associating oneself with the unchanging awareness, this wave of, or even tsunami of emotion that arises will pass. And because of the association with the silent awareness, it will fade. And it will also do something very, very important when that association is deep enough and strong enough. It will dissolve the root source of it. And over a period of time, and it will take a bit of practice for most people, and that's fine, over time, actually that trigger event that used to trigger you will stop because it will, the root source of that will go. Most trigger events, it turns out, relate to things earlier in our life, whether in childhood, early adulthood, or any stage of our life, there can be some event that builds up what I call, or what's typically referred to, not just me, as the pain body, the emotional, or otherwise known as the emotional body. And everybody is carrying this emotional body. And so these trigger events happen in life because of that. All making sense? Anybody got any questions, or shall I just keep on talking?
I think it's there's some key points, and I think maybe just reiterating would be helpful because we can see how the examples through the exercises you're uh, give us a different context, but it really does, at least for me, help it hit home that first it's becoming aware of the awareness, and then learning, I guess, how to one, first of all, recognize the factuality of what you're describing, that no matter how intense the event is, no matter how large the wave is and how triggering the event is for us, even things that are can be really disturbing for quite a while, like a close loss of, a dear relative. I mean, those are triggering. Um, but one thing that can help us process through that and make it less destabilizing and upsetting is remembering that we are that awareness and then bringing that awareness to the truth that it won't last forever. the only thing, and I don't know if you said this explicitly, but the only thing that doesn't change, that is constant, is the awareness, is that
Correct.
silence. Everything else is in a state of change at all times. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
and that, just coming to know that truth, can be very comforting and changes some of the kind of stronghold that these triggering events can place on us. And I'm saying this not as a theoretical. I've had the experience in part through your guidance, to catch those in the moment closer to the actual onset, and to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, okay, I know this won't last forever. And it's not, and I want to talk about this with you in this conversation too, how the mind can kick in then and say, okay, so it's not important, and try to dismiss it, right? And
Yeah.
that's something that I think that can be a subtle distinction. And when you talk about invitations and treasures, it's not an invitation to just say, okay, so you don't have to worry about being upset anymore ever again in your life. That's not the point. But it's to see that upset in a very different way, and to actually come to appreciate it as part of the overall sacredness or grace or divinity, if you will, is this life experience. Even those things that are upsetting are part of this whole thing we call living in the life experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's see, we have a question from Allison. I want to
Go for it.
a chance.
Um, Something that really resonated with me when we were just doing this exercise was when you said that we had to do nothing. We heard the sound and then we don't do anything to make it go away. We just allow it to just dissipate. We simply watch it melt away. And I think, by analogy, you're saying the same thing with emotions that arise or other phenomena that sort of grab at us. And I guess it's not really a question. I've been puzzling over the distinction between energy that one has to expend, whether it's to fend off an emotion, or to reinforce the emotion. People do both. They tend to wallow in it. Sometimes they reinforce their identity by saying, oh, I'm such a victim, or this is, who I am. I'm angry. I'm, we see a lot of this in politics lately. You kind of wallow in your feelings, or you do what Ken just referred to and try to push it away and say, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do it. Both of those take a lot of mental energy, some sort of energy. And you're proposing something radically different, which is to simply sit with it and observe it. And that that resonates with me. I find that profoundly comforting in a way. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, Alison, and I'm glad that you articulated that so clearly. That I cannot overemphasize the importance of that recognition that you've just come to there. Because those other two tracks that you talked about, either trying to fend it off or become it, those are, to use the Buddha's words, suffering. And the acceptance that it's here and that you are just the witnessing presence, and letting it do what it does without judgment is the route to peace. It's that simple. It's that simple. So that recognition you've just had there, Alison, that it was so profound for you. The reason it resonates with you so much is because we know this inside. We know this inside. So I just really want to emphasize and reinforce that for you.
And Philip, to add to that, and it just thought came to me that there's an essence of love in our true essence. I mean, that the fundamental is that. And coming to when Allison was using a descriptor like just sit with this, or we just say let things be, again, it's the not trying to make them go away. And then as that as we get more used to that practice or that phenomena of just recognizing, say, oh, I'm really pissed off, or I'm really scared, or I'm really just overwhelmed with excitement. I mean, there can be positive triggers too. We tend to think of the negative, but there can be very positive emotional experiences that we get sucked away in as well. And to have that awareness and then get used to seeing them as, oh, I'm having this experience, and then kind of welcoming it and just saying, you too get to be here. You are part of my whole experience. You're part of my whole self. And you also get to be here. Um, it can have profound impacts. I had an experience meditating this morning where I was kind of feeling some upset in third chakra land, is not uncommon. And in the process of the meditation, it just dissipated. And it was kind of this. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about some more about how we can maybe work with those things. But Shirley also would like to make a comment, I think, or ask a question.
Go ahead, Shirley.
Along with this, Philip, if my experience for me is when I sat with this, my awareness or the presence, the essence, will guide me into an appropriate action or response. Because the way I grew up, which I'm sure is like many of us, is that I was taught to shove everything under the carpet and not say anything, no confrontation, just swallow it down, let it go. And and I was learning, spirit led me to know we need to deal with this appropriately. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thank you again.
You're welcome. So yeah, that's another good insight. I haven't got onto that bit yet, but yes, it's true. So when you sit with it, it's accepted, witnessed neutrally, effortlessly, silently. Then many possibilities emerge, and one of which that Shirley just pointed out there is actually, there may be some course of inspired action that will arise from this situation. And that's a very important, because that in itself will have arisen from this presence, from this awareness, from this silence. Many other possibilities are also can emerge. You may be shown what the source of it was. It could be some event in childhood. It could be many things that will emerge in that process. And all of these will naturally, without you trying to think it through, will naturally arise. Will naturally arise. This isn't an effortful process. This is not something that you need to put tons of energy into. It may take at first a little bit of practice to become familiar, recognize the awareness and allow. But once it becomes recognized, once you've had an experience of this event arising, the emotion coming and it dissolving naturally, that is a leap forward of the scale of the, one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. It's that big. It really is that big.
I have found, Philip, that at least my experience was that it's taken some effort in the beginning, as you said, along the lines of building discernment ability to first find ways to get increasingly quiet. And I was reminded again of the listen and silence contrast and comparison, because it is as we get more tuned to listening, and being quieter, then things like Shirley was talking about, you get some insights that can come. But the discernment also can involve realizing or coming to just know when it's just mind chatter and when you're actually getting something from a different source. And I think that can be very helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, I have whole live streams just on that one point, and that's some of that stuff is in the app about that discernment. But there is just very, very briefly, there's a vastly different quality between something that's mind generated, which tends to have must, should, ought to, very contracting, dense, heavy energy, versus the inspiration from the silent awareness, which tends to be surprising, uplifting, inviting, expansive, feels very, very different in the body. It will take a little bit of practice to recognizing awareness at first, and that's the reason, essentially, that all realized beings over the millennia have ultimately pointed to really two key things, which are really two sides of the same coin. Meditation, and by meditation, I mean awareness. I don't mean visualization or anything like that. I mean awareness. And inquiry. And by inquiry, I mean the fundamental spiritual inquiry boils down to, I've been asked thousands and thousands of questions over the years, but they all boil down to one question, and it's who or what am I? Who or what am I? And there are many variations that I might use on that. I cover that in depth in the resources I have available. But all of the questions boil down to that. And it basically comes down to, we can take there's two fundamental extremes as far as a spiritual journey or non-dual journey, whatever you want to call it, are concerned. One is what you might refer to as, or I refer to as, the breakdown to breakthrough process. And that's where we're living from the mind constantly. We're constantly caught up in all that trauma and noise and so forth. And eventually that energy gets so heavy, so dense, and people go into, really, truly sort of challenging states of experience in life. And many things kind of evolve from those situations. But a not uncommon one is a breakdown to breakthrough. Now that's a pretty rocky road to go through, because the intensity of that and the heaviness of that can lead to, over years often, can eventually lead to, an emotional breakdown, to some degree of breakthrough. But usually that's not a complete breakthrough. It's usually partial, and it's a pretty rocky road. The other end of the spectrum, and this is what realized beings for millennia have pointed at, is a much more conscious path. It's the path of meditation and inquiry, meditation and inquiry. They're two sides of the same coin. They're not separate things. They're just two aspects of the same whole. And what that does is, when you open to true meditation, because there are many things that aren't really true meditation, which is awareness, then things begin to change. The game changes, because you start to recognize this awareness is always here, is always present, and that ultimately the experiential realization that you are it and always have been it. And it's not that this body-mind experience is unimportant. Actually, it's fundamentally important to the universe. It's just that you've not yet recognized experientially that there's another profoundly important facet. In fact, the very essence of who you are, that's always been here. And it's that, and that is the fundamental reason you're here in this body-mind experience, is to realize that.
Does anyone have their mind kicking in and something along the lines of "yeah, but" coming to mind? Because this is these can be great kind of intellectual things to hear, but the next time you're triggered, is this going to come right back to you? And so it can be like, yeah, but what about when this happens? And I think one thing to try to work with is to come to know the truth with a capital T of what Philip is sharing, that these, no matter how intense things are, they will kind of come and go as demonstrated through the model with the bowl. And there will be kind of a continuing learning process with this, right? I don't think there is a there where you can say, I've mastered fully and I'll never be triggered again. And I think you were talking about breaking down to break through, and these things can be cyclical. And one of the things that many of us experience is this phenomena of thinking we've processed through something fully. And lo and behold, it comes back and bites us once again. And we thought we were done with this. So maybe we'll get to that, but Allison has another comment. So can we come back to that, Philip?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Allison?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, where does love fit into all this? You mentioned about you can, I think Ken mentioned, you can welcome these challenges or welcome these triggers. Um, Somehow it's connected with accepting them. And I understand that. I mean, it's not, you don't resist it. You simply allow them to be, which is a way of recognizing they're okay to be here. And then they go past. And that's one of the paths to freeing ourselves from their power, which makes a lot of sense to me intuitively. I guess my question is, and maybe other people have had it as well, is that when we hear things like infinite silence or the void or with the source or something, it sounds so profoundly non-personal that one almost feels alienated, if you know what I mean.
I
That
do.
may be
I
a
think.
misunderstanding, or it may be a phase that some people go through where they do feel alienated from humanity and all of that. How does that connect with the people that say, oh, it's all bliss and it's all, I mean, both of those extremes don't strike me as quite right, but who am I to judge? Thank you.
Sure. No, good question, this. So where does love fit into this? And what was a key thing that you said there. So this infinite silence, it is true, by the way, just to become absolutely clear on this infinite silence, this infinite awareness, which are one indivisible whole, is completely and utterly non-personal. Now, the identity mind, the ego mind, doesn't like one bit. Let's be completely upfront about that, because we've all been over many years, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, however long you've been in this body-mind experience, totally conditioned into identifying that that's all that I am. And to let go of that, the ego mind's not going to want to do that so easily. In fact, it's its worst nightmare, because it equates that with death. It equates that with death. But it's not the death of the body, it's the death of identification, attachment, and belief. So, having set the scene that this is completely and utterly non-personal, where does love fit in? The answer to that is beautiful, because the perfumes, I refer to it as perfume, the perfumes of this infinite silence, infinite consciousness, infinite awareness, are words that we use: love, peace, grace, gratitude, you'll recognize. And when one of these is present, all of them are present. And not only that, the beauty of this is such that these experiences, the perfumes of this, love, peace, grace, joy, they'll all be here for no reason. So typically, you know, I am happy, I'll be happy when I've had my hair cut or whatever. This is not event-based. It's in the same way that a rose has a perfume. The perfume of stillness, silence is joy, love, peace, grace, all for no reason. Completely and utterly effortless. And so it will feel pleasant in the body. It will be the most loving experience that you've ever had. All for no reason, because your essence is it. Crucial though, picking up on something else that Alison was saying there, is that this awareness remains always unchanging, unmoving, irrespective. And so our mistake that we can make and cause ourselves more suffering is to sort of go in search of more blissful, more loving, more joyful experiences, when actually those two, from the perspective of the silent awareness, are emergent perfumes from this. So we can just simply, in the same way, simply silently and effortlessly accept that they are here, and we don't need to chase after them. When we start to chase them, we will suffer. So one of the pointings I shared a while back, it went something like this. I can't remember the precise wording I use now, but it's chase neither bliss nor run from fear. Instead, notice that which is always unchanging. And when one's associated with that, the fear dissolves. The perfume of silence is peace, grace, love, gratitude, all for no reason. So does that answer it for you, Alison?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I think that's what I was getting at when I was thinking of, you know, bliss doesn't quite seem like the right endpoint, and neither does, you know, running away from it. So you just put it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Good, you're welcome. You're welcome. Because people can become bliss seekers, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Or they develop being a seeker as a new identity, which happens to spiritual people as well. And all of a sudden they've got a new identity as an enlightened person or whoever it is. And that's also losing losing your direction a little bit.
It is, because, and this is why I use the phrase, there's a phrase I use to help people on this. It's about realizing, not seeking. Realizing, not seeking. And then I can take that further. Seeing, not looking. Finding, not searching. But just that one phrase, it's about realizing, not seeking. Because seeking in itself, as Alison correctly pointed out, is another identity, and is just then another form of suffering. It may appear at first to be a higher a higher state. This is my spiritual identity now. I'm a spiritual seeker, but actually everything that I point to and everything the message of self-realization points to is actually it's about realizing. It's about realizing.
Thank you.
But I would say that I think you're both describing the general path up the mountain, and those paths will have twists and turns, and maybe some places that we end up going back over the same area or the same general regions, and it's all part of the journey. And so I think it is it resonates strongly that the trajectory is as you're describing, but there's no rights and wrongs. And if there is a period of that journey where you develop an identity as a seeker, that's part of the journey, and I think that's key to try to, as we're developing this awareness to and this reminded me of something else that Allison was saying, is that uh, we come to develop in the role of love. It can take the form of gratitude and becoming grateful for the entire experience, even
Exactly.
recognizing the value of how it unfolded. Um, if for no other reason, I know I have, and I'm not unique in this. If I had the entire experience I've had over the last, say, 5 to 7 years happened in a flash, I'd be a puddle of jello somewhere. I would not have been able to absorb and process all of it at once. And so now, as you look back, that gratitude just grows because it happened in the way, frankly, it needed to happen for this instrument, you know, and this
It
expression. Yeah.
absolutely, and
The
it's
other
not.
thing I thought I'd just share real quickly that was also related to something Allison said, and we'll get to just a second. Um, I wasn't sure if you were maybe referring to this, Allison, but we were talking, Philip, and reinforcing how the awareness is not personal. And one of the things that we can find that may at times be confusing because it seems paradoxical is that we are somehow part of this impersonal awareness, but we are unique expressions. And I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to be flying over a large body of water at a low enough altitude so I could see the individual waves. And I took a picture to have as a reference to go back to, because in that picture was exactly the entire body of water and the individual waves. And it's not an either or. And I know this analogy is used, probably beaten to death at this point, about are you the wave or the drop of water or the whole ocean? And the answer is yes, it's both at the same time. And as we continue to grow, we can get more comfortable with that seemingly paradoxical either or situation and relax into it, understanding it's and they are happening at the same time.
Both and, yeah, both
Yeah.
and.
Yeah,
And,
which I think does help with the trigger phenomena. I don't want to drift terribly far away from what was going to be our focus, but that can be helpful too, because you can see these triggers then in the sense of, oh, this is how I'm experiencing this. And it can bring comfort to say, and whatever I'm experiencing, you're not alone. There's 8 billion of us. And you know that perhaps whatever you bring in terms of finding your way through those triggers and growing from them will also be then contributed to the field, and others will benefit from it subtly and maybe more tangibly. So Shirley, I talked way over, so please.
So would you say that we are continuously learning? I mean, really, there is no end. We are continuously evolving. So that is the journey in itself.
Okay, so there's this is another both and type situation. The realization reveals that one is this eternal and infinite silence, and has been and always will be that. It's an eternal, unchanging, unmoving essence. Yet its expressions are unlimited as well. And so within that same field is an infinite variety of experience. And so it appears like you're on a journey of learning and evolution, And that's very essential to the universe itself, because without its expression in your form, my form, Ken's form, anybody else's on this call's form, there would just ultimately simply be silence absolute. There'd just be silence absolute. So if you like, the universe, whatever label you want to give it, source, essence, silence, chooses, if you like, to express itself. And through this, it comes, the phrase I like to use, comes to know itself in its own experience. And it does this in unlimited variety. So it turns out the unique expression of Shirley is very important to the universe, because it has chosen to say, I wonder what it'd be like to be Shirley, and go through that journey. If I can sort of use it in that way. So each unique expression is fundamentally important to the universe. And whilst it appears there's a learning process going on, actually self-realization is much more about unlearning. It's dropping all of the things that we thought that we knew about life and opening to the realization of that which life is. I can do another, I don't know how we'll fix for time. We can do another little exercise here if you want. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I can keep going for hours. So
If people are happy to do that, I think another exercise would be good. And I also don't want to lose the topic I brought up several minutes ago about, how we can deal with the idea of we thought we were done and then, it comes back.
okay,
Yeah, maybe we'll address that and then we can do an exercise. How
let's
about
do that. Let's do that first. Okay, so you thought you'd done. So my mum used to have have a phrase. She's passed away now. See what thought did. See what thought did. That just came to me as you said that. You see, if you go with the idea that you think that you know, or you think that you're done, or you think that you know truth, then you don't, because that's just a thought. It's just a thought, and thoughts are untrustworthy vibrations. Indeed, an insight that came to my wife that I sometimes share is, in fact, I'll share a couple, because one, I haven't covered one of them yet today, and it really is important. One is, there's no joy in thinking. There's no joy in thinking. That might sound strange to you, but because you might think, people say, think happy thoughts. But the opposite of happy thoughts is sad thoughts. And these things come in dualities, opposites. Ultimately, there is no joy in thinking. There is joy, a joy for no reason, in stillness, silence, awareness. So you won't get there by thinking you're done. And that's just a belief. You get there by realizing that you are already there. And this is an unequivocal, unmissable realization. And even then, even when this incredible realization flowers, because of this emotional pain body that everybody is carrying around, depending upon the degree of dissolution of that's taken place, and this realization can flower in the breakdown to breakthrough process I talked about earlier, right through to a consistent meditative practice over a number of years. In any of those scenarios, it's unlikely that the emotional body will be completely and utterly dissolved. Certainly, that in the breakdown to breakthrough process, it's typically what happens is people have a deep seeing in that process, and then the pain body pulls them back into a black hole and they feel like they've lost it. And that can be very painful. Whereas if you've been on a consistent meditative practice, facing the issues as they come up, allowing the power of awareness, silence dissolve them, then it's likely that the pain body will be significantly dissolved, but probably not completely dissolved. And the power then is when these things come up, I call them like ghosts in the machine. They may still come up, but they don't hold the same power over you. Whereas before you might have been completely lost in that. Now they're seen, awareness spots them, sees them, and they can be almost like lasered very, very quickly. So this process is a process of years, even a lifetime, in even several lifetimes. But it is ultimately, as all of those beliefs and desires get dissolved, then there will be a permanent stillness and peace. And that'll be transcending into another realm, which I don't really want to get into just now. But that's part of that process. Does
Yeah,
that help now?
it reminded me of something that someone that's been teaching me classes for several years talks about a model of thinking about our journey or life unfolding as an upward spiral, that we are progressing toward realization or enlightenment, whatever the term, and that when we do encounter these quote unquote same things again, it's not that we've gone around in a circle and we're reaching it at the exact same spot. We are encountering the phenomena. Maybe it's like, I don't know, I'm not a musician. I love music, but I'm not a musician. But it seems like it could be like same note at a different octave, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not the exact same experience or the same frequency, etc. It's related. And this then, as I was thinking about this and listening to you describe it, reminded me that, okay, this then has in no way negated the essence of our message in your presentation today of triggers to treasures. There's more treasure available. There's the invitation is being represented for something else there to be explored, to be healed, perhaps, in some way, in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is like a spiral. And part of the process here is that as one deepens into awareness, stillness, silence, life will present all these things at deeper and deeper levels. And that will all be part of a process that I call just essentially integration. Integration. And this process is a very much natural part of the process. But when the depth of realization is deeply integrated, and these things can still be emerging, but in much subtler ways. This is not now suffering. This is a deep recognition that one is the living awareness, stillness, silence, and that there's a natural process unfolding through life effortlessly that will bring up that which needs to be seen and experienced and dissolved. I call that effortless grace. Effortless grace.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. It is that these things need to be brought up to resolve to continue to grow. And so I would say like the treasures would be something like realizing that it it's not a reflex for most of us to think that guilt is something we want to experience, for instance, that's usually got a negative connotation. But when you employ everything that you've been sharing with us today, you can form a different relationship with it and see that perhaps, oh, what is guilt doing here anyway? It's like, oh, well, it turns out, for me at least, I've learned it can have a protective role, and that in some ways the intensity corresponds to some part of me perceiving this was a situation that we need to learn from and don't want to repeat again. So I'm going to bring something that gets your attention. It gets, something that doesn't feel good will get your attention and maybe stick with you longer. And so the point isn't that you run around the rest of your life feeling terrible because you feel guilty about something, but you can transform that into appreciating, oh, you were there to protect me. And then to have a conversation with that guilt and say, thank you for protecting me. Thank you for what you've done. I don't think we need the intensity that we've been carrying all these years. I have learned and grown and changed and can move away from that, take that, another turn or two up the spiral, but to not just carry the guilt or the shame of those negative things that we tend to again associate with being triggered. And that's the treasure part, to have that, to see them as, oh, wait a minute, you're here to teach me something.
I wouldn't say teaching is not a word I use a lot. People use that term a lot, but ultimately, there's nothing for you to learn here.
Yeah, fair.
It's about realizing. So you will have various aha moments along the journey. It will feel like a learning process, but it will feel like that until it doesn't.
Hmm.
And that's okay. So, there's nothing for you to ultimately, I mean, I'll say this very clearly, that ultimately there is nothing for you to learn because your essence is already this.
Yeah.
There'll be many realizations, many aha moments along the way, though. I just want to say something. I didn't say that, and I will say it before we do that very brief little exercise because it's an important one. This one came from a conversation I had with my wife many years ago. She's had plenty of trauma in her life, and we had a long conversation. I'll summarize the journey, and it ended at the point saying, "Well, you're in the end, you're going to see this for yourself." And the internal message that she eventually got that day, which just popped into awareness, is a very important insight. It's one of the most common ones I use. And what came to her was this. You might want to jot this down, folks. Thought cannot heal your pain. Presence will transform it. Thought cannot heal your pain. Presence will transform it. That presence, I could change that word to awareness, stillness, silence. Same thing. So that is another part to the question you asked earlier, Ken. And to reinforce the thing about learning, we can go to this very brief exercise now. Just close your eyes. And if something comes to you in this, great. And if it doesn't matter. It will come. But just close your eyes for a moment. I'll just use the singing bowl one more time, just as our awareness recognition. And just staying with that, which is aware that the sound faded to silence and is unaffected by anything that's here now. Resting in and as that awareness. Just let this inquiry float into awareness. Don't try and analyze it, just be with it. What if I know nothing? What if I know nothing? And just be with that. And when the moment's right for you, just gently open your eyes. Good. So I don't know if anybody's got anything they want to share from that. Just pop your hand up if you do. But that inquiry. Oh, Stefan's got something. Let's go to Stefan.
Hello, Philip. I got something strange because when um, you said this, what if I know nothing? I got, then I know everything came to me. And from what you said, I think that is true. But it's not something the mind knows, it's something the silence knows. The silence
Correct.
that is me.
Correct. Excellent awareness.
That's so cool, Stefan, because almost immediately after, and I've done this exercise with Philip before, but this time immediately it was almost that same thing, but it took the form, then I know the truth. And it was so it's interesting that you had a very similar response there. Yeah, it's
So
there's you know that a year ago you did this same exercise and you do it often with your other resources that are available. And reflecting back, it's kind of interesting because I think for me, the first time I heard it, that in and of itself was triggering. You know, and you have talked about how the ego doesn't want to let go of these things, and that is part of it. Uh, it's nice to experience and to be able to share that at this point that has largely dissipated, and now there's just a kind of very peaceful comfort in knowing that truth and not feeling threatened by, what do you mean? What if I know nothing? You know, it's we're so conditioned to function otherwise.
Exactly. So those are two different insights that came in different ways that point to exactly the same realization. You know, Stefan's came as, but and then I know everything. But it's not the personal I; it's
Yeah,
the infinite I.
right.
And Ken's then I know the truth that this I is in fact the truth, and you are that. And yes, it would be triggering at first for some people because we associate the identity associates with knowledge and experience. And what I'm pointing you to, or what you're being pointed at, is actually to step to something beyond that, greater than that, infinitely greater than that, which is before and beyond knowledge, the limited knowledge. You might be the most knowledgeable person on the planet, but that's nothing compared to the wisdom of the silence, which is not personal. So
It's
there isn't
actually it's very
sorry,
liberating.
it is liberating. Well, I'm glad that you said that. It is very liberating.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reinforce there isn't ultimately anything for you to learn here. It's only for you to realize. Only for you to realize. That's all. And it's incredibly liberating.
Anything else that you want to make sure we take away or that you wanted to share?
No, I think that's I mean, I could keep going, but
Yeah.
that's probably more than enough for people, I suspect.
Well,
Uh,
I'm counting on the fact you can keep going because we want to have you back. So
okay. I can keep going for days and hours on this. But yeah, no, that's fine. I think there's plenty there. Just remember this, folk. This awareness is always here, and you are it. It really is that simple. It really is. I would not say this were it not true. And the great news is you don't have to believe a single word I say, because this realization is so all-encompassing and so powerful, it will become true self evident. And if anybody does want to follow up, you feel called to watch in, then I've got vast libraries of resources available. Many of them are freely available, but there is also the app where I have whole programs going into much greater depth. If you feel called to that, then you're welcome to join the community.
yeah, and
I think
again,
I think Stefan had a question.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, I heard something from my mind. It said, I need Philip to realize this. And I realized that is a big lie. It wants me to depend on something outside of me to get this.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's mind stuff, as you quite clearly recognize there. That's just because you don't need anything outside of you. This is within you. The role of this body mind experience of Philip is simply it's like expressing it this way, it's like consciousness speaking to consciousness about consciousness. Yeah, that's all.
And you will find this same message throughout the various forms of presenting the wisdom.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And that wisdom comes, is presented in many different forms, but its essence is the same regardless. And uh, we're all fortunate that consciousness chose Philip as an instrument or vehicle to present it in a way that some of us, can go, oh, that's what that means. But you'll hear it in many ways. And I think and a key point of the wisdom is the realization Stefan just shared, and you're underlining, Philip, is that none of this is outside of us. Ultimately, the wisdom always points us to it's all inside. It's why you are saying there's no teaching going on.
correct.
Yeah,
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 yeah. Because people often use the term spiritual teacher, and it's not a term that means anything to me, because I know there's nothing I can teach you. I can I can do lots of pointing and say, and give you lots of metaphors, examples, and experiences, but ultimately you're going to go, oh my gosh, I am that.
yeah, yeah. So learning, remembering to enjoy this, to embrace it all, especially in times, maybe in some respects, the contrast is becoming so loud and so sharp and bright now that maybe in some ways it's easier to see the distinctions and how we can find that these places of silence, because it's the opposite so clearly of the loudness, that the volume is being turned up so much. And just reminders to keep coming back to being quiet, letting that silence do its thing. And if the more intense the trigger, the greater the invitation. I think that's just something that's just a great thing. And I really am so grateful to be a part of this, to have met you, and your graciousness to have joined us twice and continue our correspondence and relationship. It's a joy, and sometimes walking up the mountain, as I did realistically a couple of weeks ago, a lot of heavy breathing and some sore legs, but there's nothing to compare to the joy of knowing you've completed the hike and then seeing the views. It's well worth the climb.
You're here for this, is what I would say, really.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's not nearly so difficult as your mind would make you believe. Yeah.
never.
It really is profoundly simple.
Yeah.
So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thank you again. Thanks to everyone live, and to those who see us recorded in the future. Hope you can pick up this energy, and it serves you well too. This is a beautiful experience. So thank you all. Philip will be in touch for sure, and hopefully see most of you again on future episodes. We want to continue this. So
Thank you both.
Bye, folks.